How much of it, because we know when we look ahead to the midterms, we're 22 days away from midterms right now, Republicans largely running on the fact that high inflation, slowing economy, that's the fault of the Biden administration and Democrats. From your assessment, I guess, how much of it is a result of White House policy versus factors that are just simply out of their control?
You know, it's never, ever one factor. You know, the one thing we learn is when we study the history, we'll know that wasn't one factor. You know, a lot of people will point to the huge increase in money supply. So as the Biden administration was sending out stimulus checks and they're putting money in the hands of consumers, we were increasing the money supply. As you increase the money supply, you've got dollars chasing goods. Those dollars are willing to chase the price of goods higher and higher. So we clearly saw some inflationary pressure from the consumer being in a very good position, having very good balance sheets, unlevered. And by the way, we still see that today. If you see the bank earnings that we saw reported today, the banks were talking about the fact that they still have fairly high deposit rates. The consumers are still in relatively good shape. Delinquency levels are low. So we still see the U.S. consumer. This far into the COVID relief, we still see the U.S. consumer with a very good balance sheet, still have the ability to spend, and that clearly is part of the cause of the inflation. We also had a situation where you could talk about the supply side. We had a change in energy policy, a fairly dramatic change in energy policy. Energy policy drove a lot of this. We've clearly had, some unforeseen weather events around the world in the food. We clearly have a war in Europe where we're having food disruption. So again, it's hard for me to put my finger on a single event, but all of these definitely have some blame and some huge contribution to why we're having this inflation.
Gary, one of the priorities of the Biden administration has been the chip sector, the passage of the $52 billion CHIPS Act. I knew you, along with some of your colleagues from IBM, made the trip down to D.C. to help that get over the finish line. From your assessment so far, how is the rollout going of this?
I think the rollout's going fine. I mean, I can't tell you it's going poorly or great. It's a slower rollout, but we knew that. The Commerce Department right now has been empowered to go out and spend the money that was given to them by the government. But really, the opportunity there was not just giving the Commerce Department money to spend. If this was going to be successful, it was going to be a huge public-private partnership. And I think we've seen the public and the private sector get together. We've seen the private sector announce massive investment in chips in the United States. You've seen it in upstate New York. You've seen it in Columbus, Ohio. And these are not, small investments. We've seen multiple billions of dollars, 10s, 20, 30, 40, 50, $60 billion investments by companies. IBM last week, when the president was there, announced the $20 billion commitment. You've seen Intel announce investments. We've seen multiple companies announce investments. So the government has done what they needed to do. They got leverage in the system. They talked about the importance of chips in the United States. They talked about being supportive of chips. We've got to get the permitting process sped up. But the private sector is bringing the money to the situation, because ultimately the money that the government's putting in is just a little tiny down payment on a big, huge issue of being chip independent in this country.